A merchant in the year 1700 lived in a world that would have felt familiar to a merchant in ancient Rome. Goods were made by hand. Production was slow, local, and limited. What you owned depended on who lived nearby, what the land could provide, and how much labor a single human body could endure. Life was not easy, but it was predictable. Most people lived where they were born. Families worked together. Skills passed quietly from one generation to the next. A weaver knew every thread he touched. A farmer understood the soil beneath his feet. Time moved forward, but it moved slowly. Then, in the late 18th century, that ancient rhythm began to fracture. Not because of war, not because of plague, but because humans learned how to unlock energy buried deep inside the earth. In the damp, coal-rich landscape of Great Britain, something unprecedented began to happen. Humans stopped relying solely on nature's limits and started breaking them. They learned to extract energy that had been stored for millions of years and convert it into motion, heat, and power on a scale never seen before. This transformation would come to be known as the Industrial Revolution. It did not arrive everywhere at once. It began quietly, almost invisibly, around the 1760s. But its effects spread outward across Europe, across the Atlantic, and eventually across the world, reshaping how people worked, lived, and understood their place in society. At the center of this transformation stood Great Britain. By the mid-18th century, Britain was already the most powerful trading nation on Earth. Its ships crossed every major ocean. Its empire stretched from the Caribbean to India. It was a nation of merchants, investors, and thinkers. But its greatest advantage was not political or military. It was geological. Britain sat atop vast reserves of coal, cheap, abundant, and close to the surface. Combined with rising wages, political stability, and a growing culture of experimentation, this single resource created the conditions for a radical shift. Because in Britain, human labor was expensive, and coal was not. That imbalance created a powerful incentive: replace human effort with machines wherever possible. And once that idea took hold, it could not be contained. What followed would not simply change how goods were made. It would change what it meant to be human. The first cracks appear in textiles. Clothing has always been labor-intensive. Spinning thread and weaving cloth consume endless hours. In rural Britain, families work from their homes. Women spin raw wool or cotton into thread. Men weave it into fabric on hand looms. The work is slow, domestic, and deeply human. But demand is rising fast. Britain develops an appetite for cotton, soft, light, and profitable. Imported Indian textiles are cheaper and finer than anything British hands can produce. To protect local industry, Parliament restricts these imports. The effect is immediate and unintended. If British producers cannot outcompete Indian cloth by skill or price, they must outproduce it by speed. That pressure ignites invention. In 1733, John Kay introduces the flying shuttle. One weaver can now do the work of two. Output doubles almost overnight. But the system breaks. There is not enough thread to keep looms running. Weaving accelerates faster than spinning can supply it. The bottleneck persists for decades. Then, in the 1760s, James Hargreaves builds the spinning jenny. A single worker can now spin multiple threads at once. It is small enough for a cottage, but it changes everything. Thread floods the market. Prices drop. Demand explodes again. The arms race continues. Next comes Richard Arkwright. His water frame is too large for a home and too powerful for human muscles. It demands a river. It demands a building. Arkwright builds the first true cotton factories, centralized, mechanized, and disciplined. Work leaves the home. It enters the factory. Finally, Samuel Crompton merges speed with precision. The spinning mule produces thread finer and stronger than anything made by hand. British cotton production skyrockets. Imports of raw cotton surge from millions of pounds to hundreds of millions within decades. Cities transform. Manchester becomes Cottonopolis. The air vibrates with machinery. The sky darkens with coal smoke. Fabric grows cheaper, but the human cost rises sharply. Skilled artisans are crushed by price competition. Entire industries in India collapse under the weight of British mechanization. While textiles roar above ground, another revolution unfolds below it. Coal mines dig deeper to fuel the machines, but they flood. Traditional pumps fail. Engineers respond with engines powered by coal itself. At first, these steam engines are clumsy and wasteful. Efficiency barely matters. Fuel is cheap at the source. Then James Watt changes everything. By separating condensation from motion, Watt multiplies efficiency. Steam becomes practical, portable, and irresistible. Factories no longer need rivers. They can rise anywhere. For the first time in history, production is freed from nature. And once freed, it accelerates beyond control. But this explosion of output carries a hidden cost. As production surges, human labor is pushed harder than ever before. Machines do not tire. They do not slow. And the people forced to keep pace with them pay the price. Inside textile mills, cotton dust scars lungs. Machinery roars so loudly that hearing is permanently damaged. Accidents are constant, hands crushed, limbs torn away, bodies caught in gears that never stop turning. Time itself is transformed. In the countryside, work follows daylight and seasons. In the factory, it follows the clock. Bells replace the sun. Shifts stretch 12, 14, sometimes 16 hours, 6 days a week. Miss a minute and lose a day's pay. Productivity soars. Profits multiply. But for millions, survival becomes a daily calculation measured not in hope, but in endurance. The machine age delivers abundance, just not evenly. Steam does more than power machines. It reshapes the land. As factories multiply, Britain's landscape transforms at a speed no society has ever experienced. Villages swell into towns. Towns explode into cities. In 1800, barely 3% of humanity lives in urban areas. By the end of the century, that number approaches 50%. People flood in from the countryside. Some are push-driven off common lands enclosed for profit. Others are pulled by wages paid in coin, not crops. Manchester becomes the template for this new world. Its population multiplies hundreds of times over in a single century. But the growth is chaotic, improvised, and brutal. There is no plan. Housing cannot keep pace. Families are packed into narrow slums, stacked floor upon floor in hastily built tenements. Dirt floors, no sewage, no clean water. Waste runs openly through streets and rivers. The air is thick with coal smoke, soot, and chemical fumes. This is the smell of progress. Rivers turn unnatural colors, green, black, grey, choked with dyes and waste. Clean water becomes a luxury. Disease spreads easily. Cholera, typhoid, tuberculosis. In some districts, more than half of all children die before the age of 5. Inside the factories, time changes again. Machines dictate the rhythm. Bells command arrival, meals, and departure. Shifts last 12 to 14 hours, 6 days a week. The workforce is cheap and young. Women and children dominate early factories. Children as young as 8 crawl beneath moving machines to retrieve cotton scraps or repair broken threads. They are small, fast, replaceable. Paid a fraction of an adult's wage. Injuries are common. Death is routine. This creates a social crisis too large to ignore. Public outrage grows. Investigations expose horrifying conditions. Slowly, reluctantly, governments respond. The first factory laws limit hours. Child labor is restricted. Education begins to replace exploitation, but only after decades of resistance. Yet the story is not only collapse. Out of the factories emerges something new. A massive middle class. Engineers, Clerks, managers, shopkeepers. For the first time, millions live comfortably without owning land. Consumer goods flood markets. Tea, sugar, porcelain, furniture. Once luxuries, now attainable. To move all of this, infrastructure explodes. Canals carve through Britain. Coal prices fall. Then canals are overtaken by iron rails. Steam locomotives shatter distance. Liverpool and Manchester are linked in hours, not days. Oceans follow. Steamships break dependence on wind. The world shrinks. Ideas travel faster. Goods move farther. Economies intertwine. But the cost is clear. The Industrial Revolution does not just build wealth, it concentrates it. And it burns through human lives to do so. Disease follows density. Cities grow faster than they can be built. Housing lags behind population. Families crowd into dark, windowless rooms. Sewage flows into rivers used for drinking. Illness becomes a constant companion of industrial life. Children suffer most. In some districts, half of all children die before the age of 5. Survivors are sent to work, not out of cruelty, but necessity. In factories, children are cheaper, smaller, easier to control. Childhood is sacrificed to efficiency. Observers like Friedrich Engels document these conditions in horror, warning that industrial progress is devouring its own people. The city becomes humanity's greatest engine, and its most dangerous experiment. Not everyone welcomes this new world. For skilled artisans, the Industrial Revolution feels less like progress and more like annihilation. Weavers who spent years mastering their craft suddenly cannot compete with machines operated by untrained laborers. Wages collapse, status vanishes, skills become obsolete almost overnight. Desperation turns into anger. Across Britain, workers attack the symbols of their ruin. Factories are stormed, machines are smashed, frames are broken in the night. These men become known as Luddites, often caricatured as enemies of progress. In reality, they are fighting for survival. They are not afraid of technology. They are afraid of starvation. The state responds with force. Machine breaking becomes a capital crime. Troops guard factories. Executions follow. The message is unmistakable. The new industrial order will not be stopped. Yet resistance evolves. Workers organize. Individually powerless. Collectively unstoppable. Early trade unions form in secret. Strikes halt production. Demands are made not for the end of industry, but for a share in its rewards. Slowly, painfully, concessions are won. Meanwhile, the revolution spreads. Britain tries to guard its secrets. It fails. Knowledge leaks. Engineers migrate. Machines are rebuilt abroad from memory. Belgium industrializes first. France follows. Germany unifies through rail and steel. The Ruhr becomes an industrial giant. Across the Atlantic, the United States accelerates everything. Interchangeable parts. Mass production. Factories on an unprecedented scale. In Japan, the Meiji Restoration turns industrialization into policy. Railroads rise. Steel mills follow. A feudal society becomes an industrial power in a single generation. The world is permanently altered. By the late 19th century, steel, chemicals, and electricity reshape civilization again. Cities glow through the night. Consumption becomes culture. Humanity grows richer and more divided. For 10,000 years, life followed the sun. After steam, it follows the machine. We are still living inside the world it built. And once it began, there was no going back. Yet the greatest legacy of the Industrial Revolution is not found in factories or machines. It is found in how it rewired human expectations. For the first time in history, progress became something people assumed would continue. Growth was no longer occasional. It was expected. Each generation began to believe it would live better, faster, and more comfortably than the one before it. Time itself accelerated. Days were divided by shifts. Lives were measured by productivity. Worth became tied not to skill or wisdom, but to output. The machine did not just reshape labor. It reshaped identity. And the world it created is still unfolding around us. Our cities, our workdays, our dependence on energy, our faith in constant growth. All of it traces back to that first moment when steam replaced muscle and humanity chose speed over rhythm. The Industrial Revolution did not end. It became the system we live inside. And like every system built by humans, it carries both extraordinary power and extraordinary cost. If you found this story valuable, take a moment to support the channel. Subscribe for more deep dives into the moments that reshaped humanity. Like the video. It helps these stories reach more people. And share it with someone who enjoys history that goes beyond dates and names. I'd also love to hear your thoughts. What part of the Industrial Revolution do you think still shapes our lives the most today? Leave a comment below. History doesn't just live in the past. It lives in the systems we're still navigating together.